welcome everyone. Great to see you. And yeah, so I think we're gonna start off with introductions. First of all, this is the panel of Space for Everyone, a panel by the Students for the Exploration and Development of Space. I will start off quickly just by introducing myself. My name is Ian Burrell. I currently serve as the chair for the Students for the Exploration and Development of Space, SEDS for short. And I'm a recent graduate of Virginia Tech, who just got my degree in mechanical engineering, and I'm looking forward to this. Harper, you want to go next?
Yeah, so hello everyone. My name is Harper Cheyenne. I'm from the University of Central Florida, which is right off of the Cape. It's about 45 minutes west of the Cape. So I go all the time and view launches. I focused first at the University of Central Florida as a business major. So if anyone here is a non-STEM major, hello. And then, yes, somebody said go Knights, charge on. And then I switched over to physics. I fell in love with physics, but I first thought that I couldn't be involved in space if I was just a business major, and that's not true at all. So I'm here today with Ian, and we are, as he said, with SEDS. I am the vice chair, he is the chair, and hopefully, I was hoping that Anthony would hop on right as I said that, but we do have a third person coming in shortly. He had a little bit of a technological kerfuffle, but once he comes in, I guess we'll ask him to introduce himself.
Yeah, certainly. So I think we'll go ahead and get started then. We have a couple of kind of general questions that we'll let each of the panelists, including myself, answer. And then that will be followed by some open Q&A. So if you guys have any questions for us, please direct them to the chat, and Angelique will help us out with that. But I think the first thing that we kind of wanted to ask ourselves, and it's something that a lot of us in this industry do kind of start off a lot of conversations with, and it's because everyone does kind of have that fun, unique story. And the question is, how did you get involved with space? And so Harper, I'll go ahead and ask you that first.
So I feel like if you're familiar with the space community, I have a little bit of an odd story of hating space first. So I grew up out at the Cape and I saw space shuttle launches all the time and loved seeing them, but they were so normalized, which is a really cool thing to say. So I wasn't into space at the time. I didn't appreciate it because, again, it was so normalized. I went to like Apollo Elementary School and my parents went to astronaut high school. Like there's nothing more cliche of a space nerd than that. But where I really fell in love with it was noticing its absence. So when the space shuttle program ended, it was very lonely here. Our town was like the #1 ghost town for a little bit in the United States. And then this crazy guy, as we called him, named Elon, came to town and started doing really awesome things. And so there was this new reinvigoration of space. And I just got excited because I wanted to bring everyone into the industry and work with everyone because I grew up with it and it was part of me. Where I once hated it. So Anthony, hello, your name is my name because I shared my link with you. I'm so sorry. This is Anthony Razo.
Hey guys.
I'm going to type his legitimate name in the chat.
Hey guys, it's been a heck of a morning for me over here in California, but glad to be here.
Anthony, we started off on the first question about love for space. So I just finished. I'm not sure if you want to introduce yourself and then tie in maybe your love for space.
Right. Okay. So yeah, hi everyone. Sorry about that. My name is Anthony Razo. I'm from Pomona, California. And talking about my love of space, how did I get started with this, right? I mean, everybody has those experiences where they see something cool with space exploration as a kid, right? And they're like, oh, that seems so cool. But then sometimes maybe that dies down. Um, but that never really happened for me. Like, I went to JPL when I was really little as like an infant, loved it. And and I always wanted to go back, and I always wanted to learn more, and I always wanted to see new things. Um, so that's kind of how it was born. But how I got started was in high school. Um, my teacher, one of my science teachers, actually came up to a group of us and asked us, hey, so there's this opportunity where if you guys come up with an actual, like research proposal, you're going to have to edit it. It's going to have to be scientific, of course. Um, that there was the possibility that it could be selected for flight to the International Space Station to be conducted. So with that in mind, a couple of us just set off and went to achieve that. And I tried to write my own, and it didn't work, of course. But I was lucky enough to assist the team that was able to achieve that, and it was really cool. And it was an experiment on microscopic organisms called tardigrades, and they're these small, little water bear looking things. Um, and the cool thing about them is that they can dehydrate themselves and then rehydrate themselves and come back to life in many fascinating ways, which begs the question, okay, what kind of environments do these organisms survive in? And we wanted to see what would happen if they would, if we introduced them to a microgravity environment. And so, yeah, it was interesting because I remember like actually pipetting the water bears themselves, the tardigrades themselves, from moss. You have to, scoop them out of the water, like water soaked moss, and then you put them on a piece of wax paper to let them dry. And then I remember, wow, these little teeny tiny things are going to be astronauts. It was really funny to me. But eventually we had the chance to send it to the ISS aboard SpaceX CRS-8 in 2016. And then from there, I was like, I know what I want to do, right? Seeing those launches, and especially seeing the launch of CRS-7 the year before, which our experiment was actually on in the first place. But if you guys know what happened to CRS-7, was unfortunately that it exploded mid-flight. But I mean, that wasn't the sad part, right? Like, I had seen a rocket explode, like with my own actual eyes in person, and I was like, yeah, no, that was still the coolest thing I had ever seen or done. And so I just had decided, okay, yeah, like space things. I don't know what space things yet. Wasn't until college that I kind of figured that out. And it wasn't even until probably the end of college till I figured out, okay, these are the different routes within the space industry that I can take, and I want to see if I can achieve that. So through that, yeah, that's kind of my story, and we'll dive into other parts of it in a minute, it sounds like.
Love that. So I guess I'll go last then. I don't have quite as exciting of a story. Growing up in upstate New York, there's not much of an aerospace presence really at all up here. There's not a lot of big flashy museums. There's not rockets going off next door. It's a very non-aerospace field. And so when I was growing up, especially as I got into middle school and high school, I started to take advantage of probably the best thing that any of us really have access to, and that's YouTube. Just going on to YouTube after school, or right before I went to bed, and I used to watch all of the astrophysics videos, like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Stephen Hawking, and like all of these are like really big astro and theoretical astrophysicists. Because me, doing well in 10th grade high school physics 1, I was feeling really good about being a physicist and being really smart. And then I started to realize that I did not like physics, and did not like math as much as I thought I would. But one of the kind of big events that happened around that time is SpaceX landing like their booster for the first time ever. And it was funny because I had not followed the space industry before that. I knew NASA existed, and that was really the extent of it. But watching SpaceX land their first booster on land that first time, it was exciting. It was like, wow, like engineering is really cool, and it can allow us to do these really crazy, awesome things. And so one thing led to another. I ended up getting into Virginia Tech for mechanical engineering, and yeah, that's kind of my starting story to becoming so passionate about it. So something that we kind of been talking about, something I think that really does touch on a lot of us young people, is that for a lot of us, a lot of the reasons why we get into space are some of these big events that happen in the world. Some of these really big kind of key news items that really show people like, oh, space is really cool. Like, that's really exciting. And I think that it is kind of important to really think like, what are the importance of some of these big events when it comes to kind of inspiring these younger generations and inspiring these new workforces to appear and these new young students to pursue those academics. And so I think I'll start with Anthony on kind of what his thoughts are about these big events that happen.
Thanks. Okay, so that's an interesting question, and when I think of that question, I'm like immediately drawn to Inspiration4, right? Like as the model for why these things kind of play out the way that they do. And you kind of look at it, right? And you look at, okay, so here's a mission where, okay, so it's on a Falcon 9, it's Dragon. Big deal, right? So what? People have flown on Dragon, what, twice before that? No, wait, 3 times, right? 3 times. Because this is the 4th flight with humans. Inspiration. Anyway, but yeah, the dynamic is a little bit different because these crew members are regular people, right? Like they're engineers, they're nurses, they're educators, they're people just like you and me. And it's different from a government astronaut, right? That's different. But what's really important with that is that it unlocks the possibility for someone to venture into this world, right? Into this realm of aerospace engineering or space science or whatever, what have you. But that inspires someone. Okay, wait, I'm just me, but wait, look, that's somebody who's a lot like me achieving this. And then that, and especially from a diversity standpoint, that's a huge issue, right? Dr. Proctor is the first Black female astronaut to pilot a ship in space, right? That's nuts. That is nuts that I know her, right? Like, and just by proxy, I can tell you I'm inspired, right? Now I feel a whole new energy for even what I do, right? And imagine what can happen when somebody who's in high school, looks up and they see this mission, and they feel an attachment to what was done. That's what drives things forward. So good question, Ian.
Harper, you want to go next?
Sure. So sort of like Anthony, the Inspiration4 mission meant a lot to me on so many different wavelengths. Something that neither of you know actually is that I have a heart defect, and I always thought that I wouldn't go to space. And I know somebody that I won't even mention their name, but he's got diabetes, and he's always told me, I'm working for this program and I'll never go to space. And so for me, the first time to see somebody who is, I hesitate to say imperfect, but I mean somebody who has beat cancer and somebody who has a prosthetic leg, going to space is so inspirational. It means that, those days of having a perfect health card in the Apollo era, that you don't even have to have that you can go to space because it's more accessible, it's more affordable. And yeah, it just meant so much. Like seeing her go up, I'm like, oh my gosh, like that could be me. Because my heart defect isn't, I don't know, it doesn't limit my physical activity. I've always gone hiking, I've always gone and done things, and I've always wanted to go to space. But broadening that scope, seeing Wally Funk go to space, seeing Damon, I mean, the youngest and the oldest person to go to space on one flight, that was amazing. I mean, there are all these events that are happening for us in the last year, the last couple of years, and then moving forward into the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see the first person of color, the first woman, the first of so many lists that I could be making right now, the first LGBTQIA plus. All of those fantastic humans are going to touch the moon. They're going to touch Mars. They're going to expand humanity in a very, very positive way. And so I think just seeing these people and being able to look at somebody and saying, I see myself in you, like that blows my mind. The representation is there and it's so very meaningful. So that's what it means for me right now.
Yeah, I think a lot of these big events, like it is really important. Like when these events happen to like kind of find passion, from that and kind of use these big things to kind of drive, your future plans and your future goals and aspirations. And I think that a lot of these, kind of recent developments are definitely going to really bring a boost in not just knowledge in the general world that these things are happening, but allow a lot of these young people to really see these things going on and to find the passion to pursue their goals and pursue, academic fields or pursue, career paths or other things like that. Because, these things happen and have been happening for the past several decades. I mean, you go to some of these conferences and you talk to some of these older individuals and, people who are kind of more mature in their career path. A lot of them will say like, oh yeah, I remember sitting down and watching the moon landing on my, TV. I remember watching, some of the early shuttle missions. I remember this or that. Or, for our younger generation now, I remember, watching these early SpaceX launches, seeing these big developments happen. It's just such a really fundamentally awesome thing to see. And it's something really great to live through because now we kind of get to go forward. And now all these people around me can say like, oh, I've seen this, I've seen that, I've done all these cool things. And I think it's really important that now as we're moving forward, that more types of people are being able to access these opportunities and be involved in these, big events, these big news items. And so I think that does kind of take us into, the name of this panel and, the idea of space for everyone. So certainly, it does start with a few of these things of getting anyone interested, but it's a very big topic. It's a very big idea, this space for everyone, space for every single person, everyone. And so I know, it means a lot to a lot of different people. And kind of what those three words necessarily mean to us. And so I guess I'll kind of start with you, Harper. What does space for everyone mean to you?
So about a year and a half ago was when I first interviewed for SEDS to be the diversity and inclusion manager. And since then, we've expanded the acronym to be JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. But when I was first interviewing for that role, I said, which is absolutely the truth, I just want everyone to be in a conversation and to feel welcome there. So if you're in this industry, or if you want to be in this industry, I want you to not only feel as though you can be interviewed and get on with the company and meet a metric. No, that's not where it stops. It's, are you integrated well? Do you have a community that will support you? Do you feel that you can use your voice and vocalize any issues you may have? Do you feel that if a coworker is not respectful to you, that you can start a dialogue and patch bridges wherever possible, or with your employer, or, you know, all over the industry? I just think that this has to happen, where everyone, young and old, and even technicians and engineers, I've heard that there's a lot of like, you know, uh, divide between even technicians and engineers. So it's like, regardless of your study, regardless of anything, like just human to human, can you have a conversation and feel respected and feel included? And I think that's the way I like to put it.
All right. What about you, Anthony? What does space for everyone mean to you?
Yeah, so when I think of space for everyone and I think of that term, I think kind of a little bit broadly. I think of a lot of the things that Harper brings up, because that's, what I immediately try to mend and try to address in a lot of what we do at SEDS-USA. Just in the official title, like that's a lot of what we try to work on. But when I think of like space for everyone, I start to think of like a bigger picture when I kind of see what space can look like in the next few years, in the next 10, 20 years. Um, I see space for everyone being a moniker that's kind of backing the idea that, as space will expand, economic opportunity in space will expand. Um, and so I believe that we will see uh, an uptick. And I think people all across the world should be able to have free access to space as a resource generation. Like as a market as it is. So I think it's projected to be somewhat like something like 4 trillion by 2040. Um, something like that. Is that number right, Harper? I see you shaking your head. Oh, sorry.
I can't think of what the exact number was, but
I think it's
it's
projected,
extensive.
but yeah, it's projected to be somewhere around that neighborhood by that time frame. And I think that equal access to that market is going to be a prevalent issue coming up. So I kind of like to think of trying to intertwine that idea in everything that I kind of work towards. And that kind of starts from being, you know, from a place where resources were hard to come by, just like I said, we would talk about some other things that led me to space. One of those being SEDS-USA, my chapter. Um, when I was in college, I was a freshman and I started a chapter for just like rockets, um, with like 6 people, and I didn't have any resources. I had like $6 in a paperclip. Like there was just nothing. It had to happen, right? Um, but that's the thing, is that like there aren't these resources there, right? In a lot of instances, and for a lot of people. As of right now, the majority of us do not have access to space, right? Or direct access to space. I can tell you, I don't know if these two do. Like it's just it's a part of our lives that's going to become very, very big in our lives very soon. And I think that people should have access to that world. I believe that more people can also be astronauts now. We've seen that. Like I said, that's why Inspiration 4 is important, because a lot of people believe that they can now. And so there's a sharp change in how the world is going to kind of look in a few years. And so, like I said, you can be an astronaut, you can be some sort of technician. We need engineers. We need people who think outside the box, like artists. The space industry is an industry for a reason, right? It's not because it's just a conglomeration of scientists and engineers. And these are lessons that I've learned throughout my time with my chapter and with SEDS-USA, right? And so, I mean, it kind of helps me to see that big picture where it's like, okay, when we all go, all of us go, or this doesn't work, right? If we go into space as a civilization, like, we have to make it work for all of us, or else it doesn't work.
I really do like that answer. Something that you did touch on that I know, we've kind of been chatting about earlier, when it comes to space for everyone, is kind of allowing everyone to have the same opportunity to, especially for young people like ourselves, whether that be college students or recent grads, having opportunities to get not only, find our passion for space, but also to use that passion and kind of develop it into, various activities or projects or initiatives or whatever. And then eventually, using those to jumpstart our hopeful careers. And I know that's something especially that we were talking about in this endeavor is, the idea of like just getting so many people in the space, or let me rephrase that. Just kind of the idea that, everybody should have the same opportunities when it comes to getting into this industry. And what I kind of mean by that, and it's something that I think a lot of us might have kind of different thoughts on, but personally to me, it's, kind of allowing everyone, regardless of the resources they currently have, or regardless of the connections or mentors that they might have, to, be involved in things that excite them. And so I think just when we think about when the space industry as a whole, I think one of the biggest things that comes up is rocketry. Like, people are excited by the big, flashy, tall vehicles that we use to fling things into space. And so kind of through that, a lot of opportunities have opened up to young people, especially students. Several organizations like NASA, Light Space for America, they have these big flashy rocketry competitions. There's hobby rocketry organizations that kind of act all over the country for people looking to get certified with rocketry levels like L1, L2, L3 and such. And so I think, one of the best things that we can, all do to continue this idea of space for everyone is to kind of keep these opportunities going, whether that be, spreading the information, whether it be, facilitating or the logistics so that more people can be involved, kind of things along that avenue. But kind of on the flip side of those of us that are in the industry is those that aren't. And it's the idea of space being a resource for everyone on the whole planet, whether you're involved in the space industry or not. And so I think, some of the things to think about there are, every time that we do something in space, how is it benefiting Earth? How is it benefiting all of us that are here? Whether that be satellites or, imagery from space, or telecommunications or GPS, or endeavors like going back to the moon. Like how thinking about how does it benefit us? And luckily, I think one of the really easy ways that we can do that is spreading this passion, amongst all of the young people that are in our lives, and amongst the people that, are going to eventually go on to maybe have a career, or maybe do some big endeavors in space, or maybe even go to space themselves. But I do think that passion is just a really powerful tool when it comes to sharing, this idea of space for everyone. But, obviously, there are a lot of obstacles that stand in the way, and there are a lot of things that, are either preventing or not allowing us to fully embrace these ideas of space for everyone. And I think a lot of these show very much so amongst the young people that exist in this world that especially want to get into space. And so I think the last question that we'll have before we kind of get into the open Q&A with the audience is, what do you guys see as the biggest barriers to this idea of space for everyone? And I guess I'll start with you.
With who? I didn't hear you, man. You got kind of like cut off.
Oh, sorry. I said, what are the biggest barriers to space for everyone?
Okay, good question. Biggest barriers to space for everyone. The biggest barriers that like I see when kind of like trying to keep that in mind with a lot of things is that like, okay, so the problem a lot of the time is that people tend to have like either no information or like barely any when it comes to space exploration or like space operations or any of like the applications of like space technology, right? So if you look at like how computers from the Apollo era like aided in the design of say like an iPhone, right? Like there are little things that I almost want to say take for granted, but like I feel like that's not the right descriptor. But like there are a number of things that like we interact with and rely on a daily basis that improve our lives that would not be possible without space, right? So like think about like how are you going to get somewhere if you don't know like map directions, like you don't know it by just by streets, right? You can GPS it, right? Guess what? All those are in orbit. You know what I mean? Like there are a number of applications that have led to direct advancement of just everyday life that for some reason we don't seem to be associating with the space industry. Because so like you have to remember, so like DirecTV is a company in the space industry. Facebook is a company in the space industry, right? Like because they have their own satellites. Like it's part of our economy now. And so I think the biggest, like some of the biggest barriers is that like this information is so deeply tied to the old, what I would say is the old generations of space exploration. People will see like something about space, like especially my mother. My mother's like, oh, I don't know what's going on. I don't know anything. Like, and she's like, can you explain it? I'm like, of course I can explain it. But like, she's a perfect example because she'll be like, I don't know like what rocket is what. I don't know what does what. You know what I mean? And a lot of people just don't have that information. Like it's not relevant information a lot of the time. Like a lot of it's just, weird factoids that sometimes you remember, like about space and about satellites. But it's important in my shoes because I tell people like, hey, like this is why we explore space and this is why we do this. So like these satellites and these things, they do this because it does XYZ for you, like literally for you, right? And I think just the biggest problem is that lack of communication. And I think we are seeing great strides by the scientific community and especially the science communication community in finding ways to address that. A lot of art and creativity and passion is being thrown into a lot of scientific communication nowadays. And I love that. And I always love to see that. So I think the biggest thing that we struggled is effectively communicating, hey, like this isn't like the space shuttle, or like, hey, this isn't the Saturn V, right? These are dead. Like that one was for the moon. This one was for a specific job. This rocket that these people just went up on is like it reuses, it's reusable, it bends itself, right? Like people won't know what they're seeing unless it's effectively communicated to them. And I think that is one of the biggest hurdles that we face.
Piggybacking off of you, Anthony, I think there are three levels, three like types of barriers, and it's informational, financial, or professional, either one of those. And informational is kind of in line with what you just mentioned, but I was gonna mention a little more of like the non-STEM side of things. So if you've got a friend that it loves doing artwork, for example, and they're like, oh, I want to make NASA patches, or I want to make like mission artwork for marketing purposes. Those jobs exist. There are people who have those roles. There are accountants for NASA. There are, you could go down the line of all these non-STEM majors that are involved in space. And so I think, tying in sort of what Anthony said with the other side of things, saying to people, maybe friends that you have, hey, these jobs exist. And also maybe from the STEM side, teaching them a little bit so that they don't feel as intimidated in being able to enter the industry, which I think, everyday astronaut Tim Dodd on YouTube, he's a great resource. If you feel like, maybe you don't know enough, go watch his videos and like, please know that this industry is for you. So that just touches on informational, financial. These things cost money. College costs money. Getting L1 certified costs money because you have to build the rocket. Conferences cost money, which is a lot of the time, at least where the three of us have sometimes found recruiters or connections. And so, with the financial barrier, it's so important if you are ever fortunate enough to get into a space of financial stability, or somebody who might be able to sponsor students, like make those connections, just be the bridge. I'm not saying to donate money. I'm saying there are sometimes financial resources that are available, but people don't know where to look for them. And the conference for a student, like the ability to go, might mean a job. So that might be, I'm talking in Florida money here, but like $80,000 to $100,000, like an engineering role or something, for example. Like that would be a huge lifestyle change that you've just opened up perhaps for them right there. And then professional, being a mentor, or finding a mentor. I would suggest, if you're on Instagram, a lot of the people that you might look up to on Instagram or Twitter, they might actually respond to you, because this is like an age of quick communication. And if you want to email them and ask a question or ask for advice, I'm not saying that they will answer you, but they might. So I think it's very worthwhile to reach out and just to check those avenues, and then to know how to dress. Simple things like that I feel like when you're an engineer, if you are a traditional, I would say, aerospace student who is an engineering major, like knowing how to dress is something that sounds so simple, but in the College of Business, they drilled that into my brain. But I once went to a conference with a wonderful group of engineers, and they wore jeans and like tennis shoes and polos. And it's like, no, please don't do that. Match your belt and your shoes. Like, little tips, okay, that sound so silly, but if you've never heard them, you're not quite sure how to logic your way to them. And Anthony, I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, I was just gonna like mention one of the things you said about like Twitter. I want to hear the rest of this though, so like please, like I want you to go back to that. But the big thing about Twitter too, like you said, like there's rarely a time where somebody's not gonna be like, oh yeah, of course I'll help you. Like, yeah, of course I'll give you more information on this cool space thing. Space nerds are an interesting like section of Twitter because we try not to harbor hostility towards other people. But like each and every one of us loves space. So like, nobody's gonna tell you like no if you like need some help getting somewhere. Especially between like us. So like putting myself out there, I'm available. Like feel free, totally DM me. It's totally cool. But like that's how it worked. Like one of the projects I'm working on right now started because of a Twitter DM. Like it's a really unique resource in that vein. So Harper, continue. Sorry.
No, that was the end of it.
I will tack on kind of as a final thought before we get into Q&A. For a lot of us, especially a lot of us young people who are getting into this kind of budding aerospace industry, a lot of us know for a lot of it, it can be a bit of a rat race. You know, a lot of us are eyeing for these really awesome companies and all these really awesome entities that are also very selective. And you know, that goes with things like NASA, it goes with companies like SpaceX, it goes with fellowship opportunities, think Brooke Owens or Matthew Zakowicz. It goes for scholarships, it goes for a lot of things. And so a lot of us young people, you know, we have to take that, you know, a lot of us, you know, to be competitive, have to go that extra mile. And unfortunately, while a lot of the ways to go that extra mile are financial based, whether that be a private high school, a better college program, conferences, or special classes or things like that, or certificates, there are ways that you can do it just on your own. And I think, as they were saying, social media might be one of the best ways to go about that. Whether that's just hopping on Twitter, hopping on LinkedIn, you know, taking advantage of the resources, reaching out to individuals. I mean, several of the interviews that I've ever had were not just from sending an application. It was from, you know, reaching out to someone on LinkedIn, or reaching out to someone on Twitter, like, hey, I see what you're doing. I think it's really cool. Like, can I chat about it? Just things like that. You know, there are a lot of barriers, but there are ways to circumvent them. And so I hope kind of the takeaway from this is that, you know, don't give up. Use all the resources you can, and you know, do your research into what opportunities exist for you. A lot of them are not going to be thrown right in front of you, and so unfortunately, at least in the current term, a lot of us have to really go out and find them. But anyway, so I know we only have a few minutes left, so I think we should go ahead and get into the audience Q&A. Angela, do we have any questions yet?
We do. So I have a comment question from Courtney. She says, I am currently pursuing a degree program that is non-STEM related. I have tried to connect with individuals in the space industry to ask for advice on how to get involved, but all the recommendation is for contractor jobs. I find it difficult to understand what that actually means. It is not easy to start a new career path at my age without the experience needed. What would your advice be for a student older than the traditional college student looking to step into an industry of space, but is also not a STEM student?
Okay, Courtney, I wanted to take this one just because it's non-STEM, but Anthony or Ian, you know me, you could just butt in anytime. So if you're talking out of the Cape, there are a lot of third-party companies. So I think when you're seeing contractor jobs, those are like third-party companies that might provide some sort of logistics. That's the only role that comes off the top of my head. But essentially, these third-party companies out of the Cape work for SpaceX, Blue Origin, but you know, I wanted to say Boeing, but I might be incorrect there. But ULA, like, and they work to provide functions that are not traditional in the sense of not being engineering. But there absolutely do exist positions that are not engineering. Now, they're hard to find. I'm not going to lie to you. I think a lot of my outlook on it has been received from people that I've discussed the industry with. So, for example, there are business people in space, right? And I would say if you're looking at a company like SpaceX, unfortunately, a lot of their business operations are out in California. But if you find a company that you want to work for, look at the open jobs that they have. If there's not something directly related to whatever STEM, non-STEM major that you're looking into, I hate to say this, but like find a recruiter on LinkedIn and shoot them a message, or find somebody who works at that company on LinkedIn who might like have the job that you want and then message them, or find mutual, like, I hate to say that this is the way you should maybe do it, but go through that route or just open ask Twitter. I know I've done that and it's been met with great results, but essentially networking is going to be key and finding the non-STEM jobs. And if you ever see somebody speaking for a conference, usually they're pretty open to messages, I would say. So try to message those people if they possess a job or they might be able to answer questions in the role you want to go into. I hope that helps. I know it's not the easiest. I flat out went into physics because I thought that that was the only option for me to be into aerospace, but it's just not the case.
I kind of have a very similar outlook on this because same, physics was my only kind of option towards space in the space industry. Um, I mean, my university didn't even have an engineering department, so like I had to find that on my own. But the way I did that was like, yeah, like through networking. Networking is key. You know, I met one person that led to another person that like brought me to this place that I hung out with there, and they talked about this and I found out about that. You know what I mean? So like through this just natural method of meeting people and gathering new information, like I kind of found out, okay, like there is some sort of opportunity in the space industry, like for somebody like me, right? Um, it's out there, but yeah, it just takes a little help. Like, don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to admit to yourself that like you need some help. Like it's okay to accept it. You know what I mean? Because it'll help you get to where you're going. Because that's what's important, right? Like you want to achieve the things that you want to achieve, and so it's no problem, um, really, to ask for help. And it's always so stigmatized, right? Like it's always so, you always feel like, oh, I shouldn't be asking for help. I shouldn't be asking for help. And the reality is that we like we literally can't do any of the things that we do in space without, you know, help. And it's important to know when you need help. So never be afraid to ask for help, because if you have like true, you know, true supporters, true people who support you in your corner, they'll help you get where you're going. And you get that kind of support by networking, finding your people. These are my people. Like, and I know I have their back just like they have mine. You know what I mean? So it's there.
Yeah, just kind of the closing thought from me on that as well. Yeah, it's a tough industry to go alone, and so definitely surrounding yourself with people who can help you and you can help them, I think is always a really good way of going about this. Anyway, though, I think there is another question that popped up.
Yes, this question is from Richard Howard. He says the requirements for becoming astronauts at NASA has been limited to scientists, doctors, and engineers, but have not included individuals with technology or technical degrees, such as nursing or other two-year degrees. Do you think that this will change in the future when more people work and live in space?
I think I'll start with this one then. This is a really interesting one because, you know, talking to people my grandparents' age, you know, their astronauts were, you know, the kind of question that came up was, oh, do you think it'll ever be a requirement or not a requirement that you be a, you know, Air Force, you know, test pilot? And then a couple of years ago, you know, and just kind of as the decades go along, we've kind of seen this gradual trend of, you know, like the requirements are becoming a little less, you know, strict and a little, you know, more reasonable for everyday people to be involved. But I think something that we're especially seeing right now, and I think we're easily seeing this with the Inspiration 4 mission, is we're starting to get to a point where it is no longer either perfect health related or, very high intelligence related or, great career path related. It's getting more and more into the realm of just everyday people who happen to have a great opportunity and the money to go to space. And I know, the financial barrier does suck, but I think that, at least in this stage, and especially these next kind of 10, 15 years, is, we're starting to see people who aren't, these expert scientists or these expert doctors or engineers or whatever. And as we kind of open up space more and there's kind of more things in space to do or more ways to get to space or more destinations in space, I think that will drive, a half tourism desire and a half, workforce desire. On the tourism side of things, it will start to get closer to the fact that regular people who have either money or someone sponsoring them can go to space. I mean, look at the Blue Origin or the Virgin Galactic or the Inspiration 4 launch. A lot of these people are just everyday folks that got to go into space. But looking a bit more into the future, and looking especially into the idea of the space workforce. I think that as we have increased access to space, both for, regular objects and for human beings, I think a lot of these entities in the world will start to have a reason to put people into space for various jobs, whether that be running a space station or running an experiment or repairing satellites or anything like that. I think once there becomes this, increased access and this kind of increased drive to put people in space, I like to think that it will open up to people with, much less academic success or career success and just become an option for anyone. Harper, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's a lot like the early computers that took up, big, huge rooms at NASA or something. And years down the road, everyone has access to a laptop. I mean, I'm sitting on a laptop. I'm pretty sure everyone here is on a laptop or on their phone or tablet. But this technology that we're working with right now used to be, I would argue, very elitist, very like you couldn't have access to it. So in that same route, I see a future where you don't have to be a scientist, a doctor, an engineer, or anything like that to go on these missions. In fact, I think that there's going to be this push for everyday people to go to space overall. And I think that will be the case because traditionally astronauts who have seen space or anyone who has seen space has come back to Earth with a more mindful view of like, we have to take care of our Earth, we have to take care of people. So I think that there's this like social drive as well to put more people in space, to have that perspective shift, because it only benefits us in the end if we take care of our Earth, if we take care of our people. So I don't think they're gonna, I don't think they're going to have that requirement all of the time. Maybe for NASA, maybe specifically for NASA, I only make that argument because when I saw the Inspiration 4 mission last week, I kept thinking to myself, NASA astronauts seem a little bit different now. Fantastic people, like not putting them in a bad negative light. But when the Inspiration 4 astronauts went up, my mind automatically went, these are civilians. These are people that are like us. And the NASA astronauts seem that much more government to me right now. And I didn't expect that. But my point of saying that is NASA might, but I don't think the accessibility to space will stop at NASA by any means.
Yeah, I definitely just wanted to echo that same thing, is that, although NASA may have strict requirements, they have a specific mission, they have a specific directorate, right? And a lot of that is scientific based, so they need very scientific minds, and they're not necessarily in the market for people who are technicians or people like that. But as the space economy grows, as space grows, those jobs will be needed. So yeah, same kind of situation where NASA might not, but I think the growth in the space industry is going to allow for many different companies to require, or to be seeking out that type of employment from offering those types of jobs. So yeah, I think we're going to see a sharp uptick in those types of professions and trades being valuable to the space industry.
Definitely. Doesn't look like there are any new questions right now. I know we got a couple minutes left, so I guess if there's no questions for right now, I just want to kind of ask Harper and Anthony, just are there any kind of final closing thoughts you have on kind of some of the stuff we've been discussing today, or maybe anything else you want to specifically highlight?
Maybe like just one thing. Maybe like one thing. It's that I just want people to know, and especially since this panel is called Space for Everyone, so this goes out to everyone. It's possible now. The world's changed in the last 10 years. It's changed in the last 5. And the advancements that are being made in this industry now and this trajectory it's heading, like, we need you. So if there's any voice in the back of your head saying, maybe I should do this, maybe there's a voice in the front of your head yelling at you, hey, you should be doing space stuff, and you know it and you love it, but just know that, like, you're needed here. Like, this industry has changed, and the people that are in it now, like all the new takes and ideas and just viewpoints, they're all welcome. So that's kind of the last thing I would want to leave people with.
I would just say, in this effort to make space for everyone, either find a mentor or be a mentor. It's so important. And it can be informal. It can be just, hey, have you put in the application for that job? If you're in the mentor position, or just getting advice, like, how do I get through my classes if you're still in college, things like that. Connecting with people will absolutely be your key anywhere you go. I met these two fabulous people through connecting with other people, and I love to look at the world that way, because I think it's absolutely factually, like, you can't disprove it, that people get you to where you are. People lead you to better people, and people are your tribe. I mean, we're all here together and we all have to work together. So I think just connecting with other people will make you a better person, and it will make the world better, because it needs your talents and it needs your perspective. And do not ever be fooled, whether you're an ally or you are a person of color or you're part of the LGBTQIA plus community. Whoever you are, you're needed here, young or old. Courtney, you're not that old. I've heard you, I think, say twice in the chat that you're old. You're not. We need you here. And regardless, you have something to bring to the table. I promise you.
And I guess I'll kind of add my closing thoughts as well. Is for a lot of us young people who are in this industry now, we are at a very interesting part of it, because right now everything that's going on in space does not rely on a government contract. And what I mean by that is, I've talked to a few of people kind of in the older space industry, people who worked in the early shuttle era, and saw the shuttle program happen, saw the Constellation program happen and then fall away, saw the end of the Apollo era even. And I think I think something that's really important to kind of understand with the young people like us is that this is one of the first times in this industry where a lot of people can look at the industry and say, I can jump into this and have decent job security until I retire. And it's a very interesting thing because it starts to bring a lot of people who aren't necessarily super passionate, but can just be the regular everyday worker. And now that's not to downplay passion. I think all of us on this panel, I think a lot of us in general are people who are very excited about space. It's something that, we're constantly thinking about. We want to do this, we want to do that, we want to pursue these opportunities, we want to be in SEDS and other things like that. But for a lot of everyday regular people who can see things like the Inspiration 4 mission happen, where regular civilians are going to space, where they can see some of these companies doing all these work and having these rocket launches or putting these missions into space and not have it be involved with government funding in any way. I think it's just a really exciting time to kind of see that, as we come into these next few decades, this industry is going to keep exploding the way it is right now. And, of course, that's going to include these really cool missions in the future, like going back to the moon and potentially, setting up a permanent settlement there, or Mars, or anywhere else in the deep solar system. But it also just means, that more everyday job openings will start to exist and more everyday opportunities for people to engage with space beyond the current way of just telecommunications and GPS that a lot of us know. And so I think my big hope in the future is that kind of through this continual growth and explosion of the industry, that there's an equal growth in opportunities for people and equal growth for flow of information, especially down to the young people, to take advantage of those opportunities. So anyway, I know it is 4:40 right now, and I think this is the time we were supposed to end. Angelique, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Well, thanks to Ian, Harper, and Anthony. I think this was a very good session. I think that, as we've continued stated, age is not as important. You're able to offer so much information, and then people starting at different times. I think this is a right opportunity, a right time, and you just have to take that initiative. I definitely agree with, don't be worried about reaching out to someone directly, because if they're putting themselves out there, they're open to the conversation. All right, well, everyone have a great afternoon. Look forward to seeing you in some of our other sessions.
Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you.
Our emails are in the chat, by the way, if anyone wants to connect with us for any reason.
Right on.
We're totally open.
See the chat quick. And then you can also check out on the Hoover app as well.
All right,
Thank
folks.
you.
Thanks for attending.